and then do what this is designed to do, get those afterburners on and go vertical. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for clicking and coming through. Today we have the very special and long anticipated F-15 Strike Eagle from DC Designs. Now this is this is the very first offering that DC Designs have done for Microsoft Flight Simulator, but that doesn't mean they haven't done this before. They've done loads of other planes for lots of other simulations, so they're coming from a pretty good place. Now, this isn't the only jet in Microsoft Flight Simulator, as a lot of you will already know. There is also the Eurofighter Typhoon and the MB339, both of which are available in the marketplace. But those did start as third-party add-ons, and they've progressed, and now they are in the marketplace. This F-15 is pretty good. Comes in lots of variations. You've got a two-seater, you've got a one-seater. I'll go into more detail about that later. But it does retail for £26.99. That's pretty pricey. And in euros that's $33.75, and in dollars that's $40.99. Now that is considerably more than the Typhoon, which is £17 at the moment, and the MB339, which is $20. But you do get a load of detailed models. You get the F-15C, you get the D, you get the E, and quite a lot of liveries supplied with both of those models. And of course, both of those cockpits in the single-seater and the two-seater do look quite different. Now, as we all know, Microsoft Flight Simulator is not really optimized for fast jets. There has been some negativity about the Eurofighter Typhoon. Not so much about the MB339, but when the Typhoon came out, it was very, very fast. And I think it took people by surprise. It wasn't particularly good in terms of detail. A lot of people were saying go to DCS, which is absolutely right, because DCS is purely for study level, mostly military aircraft. So suffice to say, the F-15 is not study level. And again, if you do want that kind of study level detail, head off to DCS, blow up some planes, go and shoot some MiGs down, go and do whatever you want. That's what DCS is for. Microsoft Flight Simulator obviously is absolutely enormous and is unique in the fact that you get to fly anywhere in the world in real weather conditions, all sorts of different things that make it totally unique. Even though fighter jets are constrained by the native model behaviours and animations, they're here and they're here to stay, and they're only going to improve. That said, this F-15 is fully compliant with Microsoft Flight Simulator native models like rain, effects and sounds, glass reflections, and obviously the new modern aerodynamics, which means you can put it into a flat spin and you can do departure spins and all that kind of stuff. But it is held back by the subsonic coding that Microsoft Flight Simulator does have, unfortunately. So you can't travel at thousands of miles an hour and go and break the speed barrier and get a sonic boom and wake everyone up in their houses. So the F-15 does come with a couple of animations that the other aircrafts don't. One of which is G-Vapor. And that's obviously when the vapour starts to form over the wings when you're pulling high Gs. It doesn't look great, I don't think. I would actually prefer it without. It also comes with afterburners. That's a positive. Again, the afterburners are kind of okay animations. I wouldn't say they're particularly good. Obviously, Microsoft Flight Simulator doesn't have those types of animation capabilities quite yet. And the other things that they're missing are obviously water animations, vapor trails, wing vortices, and anything to do with fire whatsoever or smoke. Get on it, Microsoft Flight Simulator. It'd be brilliant if we had an update that included all of those. So, as always, at Untitled Projects, we do the same thing for all aircraft. We take it for a little spin. We do a cold and dark. We look at the maneuverability, the detailing, the design, the way it performs inside the simulator. And also, my favourite part by quite a long way is we include a pretty comprehensive history, although short, and a couple of little stories. And that's what we're going to get into now. We're going to start with the rich history of the F-15. And it starts in a place that you wouldn't expect. It starts during the Cold War. And in 1951, during the Korean War, American pilots fought fierce air-to-air battles in their F-86 Sabres against Russian MiGs. And these American pilots had learned their dogfighting skills in World War II, and as a result, with this skill, they achieved a pretty high kill ratio of about 10 to 1. And this was a pretty incredible kill ratio for the day, because obviously a lot of these pilots had come out of the Second World War where losses were incredibly high and kill ratios were very, very variable, especially against the Luftwaffe. But then the Vietnam War came along, and this was an entirely different type of war. And the US pilots were flying the infamous F-4 Phantom against the vastly improved MiG-17s, 19s, and eventually the MiG-21. And US air-to-air combat strategy had changed from close-range dogfighting to supposed long-range guided missile technology. But this, however, didn't really work the way it should have done. And their first missiles, the AIM-7 missiles, only had a 14% hit rate on their targets. That was pretty bad. And the F-4 Phantoms only had missiles. They had no guns. So as soon as their missiles failed and they ran out of any type of armament, they were left totally defenseless without any type of gun to engage in a close engagement or dogfight. Even with the introduction of the Sidewinder heat-seeking missile and the radar-guided Sparrow missiles, which were designed primarily to shoot down large static targets like bombers at high altitude, this still didn't work the way the pilots needed them to work, because the MiG pilots were quick, they were manoeuvrable, and as a result, dogfights ensued. And the MiG pilots knew this. They'd come up with a strategy which allowed them to bring the F-4 Phantoms into close proximity so they could get them into a dogfight. And the kill ratios went through the roof. And for some reason, classic dogfighting skills hadn't been passed down to US pilots in Vietnam that were flying the F-4 Phantoms. And so they didn't have the type of aircraft, they didn't have the armaments, and they didn't have the necessary skills to evade the MiGs. They also had absolutely terrible visibility, which they used for takeoff and landing, but mainly they were looking at radar screens inside the cockpits. And so they just simply weren't designed for anything that was close range. And the kill ratio at times was 1 to 1. So this had to change. And the Air Force got together and they needed to create an ultimate air superiority fighter that could dominate any war theatre. And this initiated the FX program, or the Fighter Experimental Program, of which 500 designs were initially submitted, but none of them impressed. None of them broke the mould. And by this time, Russia had showcased their revolutionary MiG-25 Foxbat, a two-seater that was capable of flying at Mach 3.0 and flying at an altitude of 70,000 feet, and this really got the Americans going. So the Air Force had to look outside of their bounds. They had to look beyond their technicians and their designers. And when they did, they found a guy called Major John Boyd, who was known as the Mad Major because he was so disruptive and pretty mental. And he was a fighter pilot from the Korean War and had absolutely loads of experience with strategy and various different types of aircraft. And he was a massive disruptor. And he pissed off a lot of people. So they invited him down to the Pentagon and they said, look, we need your skills, we need your strategic mind, we need your technical ability, design us a plane and we'll build it. And he did. He came, sat in the Pentagon, said I need to use a really, really powerful computer. The Pentagon said no. And so he did it anyway. He annoyed a lot of people, and he was almost charged $1 million for computer use that he did on the side after hours without consent. But when they looked at his designs, they were absolutely groundbreaking, and they let him off. So they tendered this initial concept out to 3 companies, of which one of them was McDonnell. And if you know anything about fighter planes, you'll know that McDonnell are absolutely rich in heritage, and they've created some of the best aircraft in the world. They've created the McDonnell Douglas A4 Skyhawk, the F4 Phantom, the DC-10, the AV-8B Harrier II before it became a British aircraft, the C-17 Globemaster III, the FA-18E F Super Hornet, the AH-64 Apache. So it's a pretty amazing lineup. So they absolutely have some serious technical knowledge and ability to create some amazing aircraft. And after a year or two, which is a pretty short period of time to create an amazing aircraft, on June 26, 1972, the F-15 Eagle appeared, and it was named the Eagle by James S. McDonald, the founder of McDonald Aircraft. And it was taken for its first flight the next day on the 27th, 1972 at Edwards Air Force Base in California. And 6 months later, the Air Force approved the Eagle for full rate production. Now that's a pretty quick time frame for an aircraft of this ability, but it had broken all of the time to climb records that the MiG-25 had previously held, and this plane was designed almost solely to beat that aircraft, and it made the MiG-25 look like a civilian transport. But the F-15 did more than that. It brought in radical technology that hadn't been seen. This idea was to change all aircraft after the F-15. It also had state-of-the-art long-range air radar, which coupled with better and better technology from the missile sector, created an absolute ultimate air superiority killing machine. Now pilots could get extremely long-range kills without ever seeing their opponent. They never had to look down because everything they needed was in the HUD. They had their speed, they had their altitude, angle of attack, the weapon they'd selected, they had their lock, everything they needed. So rarely did they need to look down during an engagement. So when an aircraft like this appears, the world wants it. And of course, because it was an American aircraft, they would only sell it to people who were essentially their closest allies. And the countries that snapped it up first were Israel, obviously a very close ally to the US. Japan's Self-Defense Force has got quite a few of these, and the Royal Saudi Air Force amongst others. And in its almost 50 years of service, it's operated in so many combat zones. It's operated in Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm in Iraq, Operation Deny Flight in the Balkans, Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan, Operation Iraqi Freedom in Iraq again, Operation Odyssey Dawn in Libya, and most recently, obviously, Operation Inherent Resolve against ISIS. And for all of that time in combat, it's had over 100 kills and no losses, which is an insane stat. Out of about 1,500 F-15s of all models and all types that have been built, there's been a total of around about 175 plus that have been lost to non-combat causes. And now it's known as one of the most reliable fighter aircraft in the world, with only one loss per 50,000 flight hours, which sounds pretty impressive. And there are three quite famous stories, relatively close to home, that encompass how reliable and how powerful and resilient this aircraft was. And one of them was on the 1st of May 1983, where an Israeli Air Force pilot in an F-15D collided mid-air with an A-4 Skyhawk during a training flight, and this caused the F-15's right wing to shear off almost completely. But despite that damage, this aircraft managed to land at a nearby airbase with one wing. Now, the engineers had never thought that this would be the case. They would think that the pilot would just eject and get out of the aircraft, but they didn't realise that the plane could fly on essentially one wing. Pretty awesome. And that aircraft was actually repaired and then subsequently saw further combat action. So the F-15 still operates in all its forms even today and is still a massive player in the US Air Force as a superiority and dominance fighter. Right. That was the history part. Hope you enjoyed it. Pretty rich. Now we're going to get on the ground and we're going to attempt to do a cold and dark with very limited usability inside the cockpit and take off and do some normal manoeuvring and see how this baby works. Right, back on the ground. We are at Edwards Air Force Base, the birthplace of this aircraft. Maybe this is the hangar it came out of. You can see there is the ghosts of other planes here. I don't know why that is. That's very, very odd. Bit weird. But yeah, Microsoft Flight Simulator always offers up some weird little bugs going on. Anyway, so here she is in all her beauty. Now, this is the F-15C, so this is the single-seater. This is the one I actually prefer. I find it a bit easier to fly. The two-seater, apparently you can sit in both seats. I don't know if this is an online thing. Not sure. I haven't had the ability to do it yet, but yeah. Anyway, so I think the plane looks really, really nice. I can't really fault it graphically. I think it's got all the right textures. It looks like the business to me. It's got all of this very, very close detailing. Lovely lights, lovely intakes. Canopy looks good. The whole thing, really. So, I mean, it's just a beast of an aircraft. Anytime you see an F-15, it is just so nostalgic. But, yeah, very nice. This particular one is from the 493rd and has all the right markings on it, all the right colours. Pretty cool. But if you go into the cockpit, you can, just like you can with a lot of other models, especially Coronado, you can turn on all the externals. So there you go. Engine covers, pitot tube covers, little ladder, let your pilot in, although we probably need to open this up. Then we've got some weird dude here who, if you go inside, he is a mixture of American GI, but then he's carrying an AK. So, yeah, bit weird. Should be an M4, probably. So I'm glad he's protecting us from this caravan over here and all these random people standing about. So thanks very much. Anyway, let's have a look at this cockpit. Now, it's not the highest fidelity thing I've ever seen. It's not bad. I would say it's probably better than average. Quite a lot better than average than some other aircraft that have been ported across. Obviously, this hasn't. This has been built. But it's not too bad. I think from the cockpits that I have looked at, to get an idea of whether this is visually representative of a real F-15, it seems pretty spot on. Now, I know that you guys from DCS, you study level people, are probably going to pick up a lot of little things that aren't right, and I'm sure there are. But from my perspective, and from me doing a visual sweep between this and photographs that I've found online, it doesn't look too bad. So the other thing that's slightly disappointing, I would say, especially for the price point of £27, is that it isn't a fully working cockpit, not by any means. And I would say that it probably only has about 10%, 10 to 20% usage. And that's kind of a bit frustrating because I was hoping it would be a proper cold and dark, proper navigation, proper everything for, like I said, for the price point, and considering that this has been in the pipeline for a long time. But it is the first aircraft from DC to come into Microsoft Flight Simulator, so hopefully it will only improve and it will only get updated. So to start with, if you look at this cockpit, you can almost tell the bits that don't work. I mean, this is not particularly well rendered. There's some kind of weird stuff going on around here. I don't know, it just seems it's not quite on point for me. I'm definitely a massive detail guy when it comes to design and visuals, not necessarily with usability, but I like to see proper shadows. I like to see proper distress, and this to me is not quite there. There's some different variables in terms of some things being quite high fidelity and others not. That said, like I said, I think it is pretty much there in terms of the way it should look. Let's just open the canopy, get a little bit more light in. So not too bad. Anyway, so like I said before, it only works 60% of the time, every time. No jokes. It only about 10% of these work. So you can start it up. Everything you need here for electrics and your avionics is on this side. And then there are some elements over here that do work. Some of the autopilot function does. I haven't used the autopilot, so I don't know what's going to happen with that. Pop it in the comments if you have. Let me know how it works. I'm always a stickler for not being able to use autopilot manually inside the cockpit. I just set it on my Hoitus. I think this maybe looks a bit weird. I'm not sure whether that's quite right. Let me know if you think it is. It doesn't seem like it's the right color. I think it's meant to be black. I'm not sure. But again, all you DCS geeks can let me know that. So apart from having all the basic stuff, none of these computers are workable. You can't click between different variables. You can't obviously load missiles on or any of that kind of stuff. That is not available to kill people in Microsoft Flight Simulator, and I don't think it ever will be. It's not designed for that kind of thing. Obviously, you've got all your basic stuff. You've got your knots, you've got your angle of attack, you've got your acceleration limits, you have your navigational aids, all very clear. You've got quite a few of these, which is nice. Always good to have a clock. Yep. Altitude and your rate of climb, which goes up to 6. So you're going to exceed that. Temperature, RPM, again, for both engines, this all works very well. When you start this aircraft up, you do really have to wait for both engines to initiate because they take some time to initiate between each other. And if you're sitting at the end of the runway and you start up, then if you put the throttle down straight away, you're going to take off with one engine and you're just going to flip to the side and crash and die. So be careful. Here's all your spy equipment, your cameras, your record on, all pretty good stuff. And like I said, not particularly usable. There's a couple of little bits and bobs that work over here, transponders and alike, but that's it. So yeah, like I said, a little bit disappointing, but it's a nice plane to fly. And I'm going to start it up and I'm going to get it to the end of the runway and we're going to take it through its paces. So initially, all you really need to do is get your master battery on and your avionics, and straight away you'll see that it all starts up. It all initiates in the way I think it should. This goes level, which is very realistic, I guess. And the HUD is another whole topic of conversation. Now, it looks good when you're here, but as soon as you get up in the air, it starts to do some weird stuff and it begins to pixelate a little bit. I don't know if it's a bug or DC is trying to get some realism there, but it does become almost unreadable. And considering the rest of these instruments are pretty small, and you want to know your speed and you want to know your angle of attack and everything, it is quite difficult. So yeah, the brightness of this also can be strange, and also the HUD can disappear below the threshold here, which is frustrating to say the least. But it's got everything you need on it, your altitude and your speed and some other variables that you might need. Of course, your angle of attack in percent and your directional. So apart from that, let's get this plane going. So once you've got all your avionics on, you've just got your engine starters here. It appears that you've got pitot heat, but you don't have de-icing. Now, I don't know if that's going to be a problem when you're in the clouds. I haven't experienced it yet, but we're going to find out, I guess. And apart from that, we can start our engines, which sound pretty sweet. And then on this side, we've got some fuel tanks, which are all open already. So pretty useful. Don't know if you can do a fuel dump, doesn't look like it. Everything else along here is unusable apart from this area here. The transponder works. I don't know if that works fully. Let's just make sure we're not too far up in terms of the throttle, and that our parking brake is set. Ooh, that was a close one. End up in the hangar in front of us. So yeah, some nice sounds, I would say. Now that's a weird little bug. When you go outside, you're on the ground, the canopy opens. Strange. Pilot's in there now, looking sweet, looking cool. Here's our engines. Hopefully both initiated now. So yeah, they're still initiating, taking some time. So they do take a really long time. Whoa, here we go. Yeah. Fully done. The heat blur is pretty good. We'll have a look at some of the animations up in the air, especially the G-Vapor and the afterburners, and we'll make some judgments. So while you're taxiing, one thing to note is that it is pretty stable while you're taxiing, but also if you try and do very, very tight turns, you're going to tip your wing into the ground and you're going to blow up and die. So just be super vigilant of that and try and just brake it left and right, depending on which way you're going to go. Just little dabs of pressure here and there, and you should be fine. It does taxi really, really fast, even with a little bit of power on. So, yeah, little tip. All right, lined up and ready to go. So, this sometimes goes violently to the left and right. Now, I don't know if that's because of my Hoitus, and you should be using a joystick here, just to let you know. No yoke. And it should rotate at about 130, maybe 140. So let's spool it up and see what happens. I'm just going to roll it quite slowly to start with, because the speed, which is here, is going to get going pretty fast, and hopefully we can keep it straight. It is very sensitive. We'll just gradually get it up to speed. And it's going to get up to the speed really, really quickly. And there we go. Gear up. And then do what this is designed to do. Get those afterburners on and go vertical. Pretty impressive the way this just smashes through heights like this, altitude. And it is supposed to get from 0 to the height of Everest in less than 60 seconds. And that's where we're at. There we go, 28,000 feet. And still going. Now you've probably noticed immediately that the HUD does some weird stuff. Well, let's just get above this layer of cloud here, this upper layer of cloud. So realistic, Microsoft Flight Simulator, when it comes to weather. So we're gaining, or we're still losing a little bit of speed here. So to start with, it's very, very stable. It trims really nicely. It flies straight and level. I mean, it is a very, very sturdy aircraft when it comes to flying long distances. So you can check that box. The next thing is some of these animations, which, you know, I applaud DC for doing this, but I think that we're going to have to wait for these animations to get good. Like the G Vapor, obviously there's no type of vapor trail or wing vortice or anything like that, so that's not really supported, as well as water animation. So there's lots of things that are missing, but you can see now that this G Vapor is essentially just an image, a static image that is initiated at a certain amount of pull. You can't see it on that side, but in general it's not great. I'd prefer it without it. The Typhoon doesn't have it, and yeah, that's my opinion. And hopefully when we get an update in the future, we'll get all of this rich animation that will come in, and then things will really begin to look awesome. But for now, hopefully this will improve in the future. Now the next thing is, I might need to lose altitude for this, is the afterburners. And I'm going to get down a little bit lower because the afterburners don't appear to work at anything above 20,000 feet. So I'll see you down a little bit lower. Okay, we're down at about 16,000 feet now, 15,000 feet. And let's get those afterburners on. So, not bad, but you can tell that that's just a looping animation with a little bit of static in it. It doesn't change a whole lot. I'm not too impressed, but it's not bad, I would say. And I know that it's limited by Microsoft Flight Simulator as a simulation, and these are going to look a lot better in DCS and so on and so forth. But as far as afterburners go, they're pretty good. Now I know the Typhoon has also got afterburners, and the initial model didn't, and now it does. So your choice, if you like it, if you don't. I'm sure there's going to be divided opinions. Right, next up, maneuverability. So let's do an aileron roll, which kind of looks like a barrel roll, and this aircraft is so maneuverable. I mean, yeah, pretty sweet. It's quite hard to overstress this as well. You can pull it to pretty tight turns, not too much, not all the way down, but pretty good. I mean, this is what it's designed to do, and it's very, very responsive. Apart from that G Vapor that does actually annoy me a little bit. So yeah, and obviously the other test. Can it fly upside down with the afterburners on? Of course it can. It's an awesome jet. And again, super stable. I mean, you can just do whatever you want. What more can I say? I'm not even a good pilot, and that is very precise. So I'm going to take you to Scotland now and do some low-level flight in some relatively low visibility. Scotland's always an amazing place to fly any type of fighter jet, pushes to its maximum capabilities, and it also looks beautiful. So see you there. that is it. So thanks for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed the review. If you do like this kind of content, drop a like in. You can always put a dislike if you didn't like it. It's fair. Otherwise, subscribe if you want more of this kind of stuff. There's loads more coming out. I've got a VR video on the way. It's taken me a long time to do that one. But apart from that, have a great day, and